You know, he's really he's shameless in intellectual argument. He's absolutely without character, a moral foundation, or even intellectual substance.
All right, welcome back to Getting Lit. Last episode, we celebrated the 50th episode, which was basically an excuse for me to monologue and celebrate my favorite episodes and your favorite episodes. And this episode, we'll be talking about Ayn Rand's Anthem and the 2005 Michael Bay movie, The Island. But before I do that, I just have a little bit of housekeeping in the sense that a lot of people have been telling me that they want to know what's coming up in terms of reading so they can kind of read along with us. I think this came from the Gene Wolfe series that I'm doing with Kelby and David, that I've, revealed that that's what we're going to do. So people have asked for me to do that with all the books. So I've created a list and I'm going to link that to my Substack, which will be in the show notes. And so you can just go to that and see what vaguely we're doing in order for the next few months, I guess. Things might change around and that list will not include, the different media that I might be pairing it with and stuff. Anyway, so today we're talking about Anthem, Ayn Rand, and a very curious accompanying media, which is The Island. And to join me is a very special guest. Possibly, I don't know, I'll ask him about his history with my podcast because it's all about me, you see. But it's Organized Meat, aka Erik. Welcome.
Hey.
Hey.
Thank you for having me on.
I feel like you're one of the OG listeners to this podcast. Like, you've been around for a while.
Yeah, no, I've known about it for a while. And I'm like, I remember you were sort of like one of the first literary podcasts that I was into, because there were a lot of podcasts that were about movies and music and just sort of political podcasts or stuff that blended all of those. But you were kind of the first one I was turned on to that was all about, books, literature, and you also had some social commentary to that. And I've been a fan of yours for a while.
Yeah, cool. I'm curious how you found. I never know how people find this podcast. But yeah, we'll have to discuss the avenues. I also, when I discover podcasts, I never remember how I find them either. So I'm not putting you on the spot there, but maybe after the show we can work it out or something. Yeah, because I think about it sometimes when I go on other people's podcasts and they're like, oh, how did you find it? And I'm like, I can't remember, honestly. I just listen to lots of things and then other people guest on their show and you never know. It's like a babushka doll sort of situation.
Yeah. I mean, I know, I remember back when I found your podcast, maybe I was listening to a lot of Perfume Nationalist. I was listening to a lot of Rare Candy. So maybe one of those guys retweeted it. I don't know, but I found it somehow. Yeah. Honestly, I can't remember. It was,
Well, we're glad to have you. And speaking of Rare Candy, I asked you to come on because you mentioned when you went on their podcast that you had read and enjoyed Anthem by Ayn Rand. So just to sort of get started, what's your kind of history with Rand? I have a whole thing about her that we'll get into, but let's start with you first.
I mean, I got into her, honestly, because people, when I went to college, in community college, when I was just kind of first starting out and thinking that, oh, maybe I'd want to be an English major or something, people were telling me, oh, Ayn Rand, she's not a good writer. Her politics are bad. She's just a bad writer. And I was always very curious about that. So I read her for myself. And I mean, after you read something like The Fountainhead, which was like the thing, which is what I started out on, like I, it dumbfounded me that anyone thought that she was a bad writer. Like, it's crazy. And after that, I read Atlas Shrugged, and then Anthem, which, I mean,
kind of went
I guess,
the reverse order.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
sort of.
it is, yeah. But I mean, it's which, yeah. Anthem is a very different book from anything else she's done. But I got into
It's
her
short.
essays and her philosophy. Yeah, yeah, short, yeah. But no, I got into her essays and her philosophy, all the objectivist material. Like, I really devoured, and like that kind of, I just wondered why everyone who was like this whole like liberal sort of establishment teachers that I was learning from in college, like, why were they telling me not to read Ayn Rand? And I realized it's because it was her politics, which, like, I mean, they're mostly associated with libertarianism, but if you just take them at what she was actually writing, I don't think that they were too out of line with what a lot of those teachers actually believed, which was just like about, this basic thing of like human freedom. So, yeah, that was like my first awakening to her. And after that, that's what sort of made me become skeptical of like a lot of what the professors that I was learning under were telling me, and maybe I could like read authors like Joan Didion and like have a different opinion on things, right? Like, because there are a handful of authors that Ayn Rand was like included in that I was advised like, yeah, you probably shouldn't read those.
Yeah, what's really interesting, and I'm glad you brought up the fact that like her politics, well, there's the writing and there's the politics. We'll get to the writing, but the politics stuff is like people talk about it like it's so beyond the pale, but it's literally just sort of like liberalism on steroids. Like that's all it is. That's all it is. Like, and so which is that, it's all about individual autonomy and, not being kind of enslaved to others and blah, 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 blah. And people talk about that and let that political, philosophical reputation precede her writing in a way that they don't do with like, I'm sorry to do like the lib blue hair thing right now, but they don't even do this with literal fascists. Like no one clears their throat and like, talks about, the politics of like, say, Ezra Pound. Like usually his poetry will just be introduced and then later on it'll just be a footnote. Oh yeah, he was like a big supporter of Mussolini and loved fascism. Like, and but people with her, it's always like front loaded with her political opinions or whatever. And then the writing itself is colored by that. And it's just such a strange approach that people take to her, which I find, like you, I had an education where, if she was mentioned, she was sort of just disparaged and dismissed as a writer. But it was really interesting looking into this book and seeing contemporary reviews of this, and all of them, even if some had a problem with like, what we would call today the world building or the kind of believability of the kind of dystopia that she's created. All of them, literally all of them said, oh, but she's a good writer. Like, whereas now it's almost like she's one of those pesky, evil libertarians and she's a bad writer, and it's almost like they get this sort of like the politics of it really, really color her abilities as a writer in a way that they really do with very few other writers, which I think is weird.
Yeah, no, that's all I hear about her today is like, oh, she's such a bad writer. And I really want to know where they get this from because I've read some like modern, like schlocky, like Janet Ivanovich type writers or whatever. Like, there's, like, I mean, there's some bad writing today. And these people, just like want to criticize her for like her writing and say it's bad because they don't have any real like logical way to refute her on her politics. So they have to refute her creatively. And like that stuff's always going to be subjective a little bit, but I mean, I just don't know anyone that could say she's a bad writer. I mean, she was a bestseller, right? Like, I mean, Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged sold millions of copies.
And these are very big undertakings too. Like Atlas Shrugged is like 1,000 pages or something, isn't it? And like people were lapping this shit up and they were reading it because there's probably, even if like your idea is that people lap this up for political reasons, that she's a real kind of libertarian and there's lots of libertarians in the US, so they all bought the books or something like that. I don't know. Like I feel like that's not enough for that amount of sales. I feel like a lot of people read it because they were, entertaining books. They were, particularly the bigger ones like Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead are like sort of grand sweeping narratives, like melodramas, and they are very heightened. So maybe that's something as well that people react to. Like, and this is similar in Anthem because Anthem is a dystopian novel. It has a kind of, the language in it is heightened. A lot of it is on the nose, like it would be in a lot of dystopias, because dystopias are refracting something about modern society and like extrapolating that out into a future society, right? And the same with her longer books is that, they're really long. There's long kind of passages in it of like philosophical treatises, which you may or may not agree with, but like heaps of people bought these, and like there's got to be something there. Like, I'm going to do in the very near future, I'm going to do Jacqueline Suzanne's Valley of the Dolls. That also sold a heap of copies, and for similar reasons, because it's like a grand sweeping melodramatic kind of narrative that you actually have to be a pretty good writer to pull that off and to like carry people along through the story. So I don't know. I feel like when people say Rand is a bad writer, they are, like you're saying, I'm kind of conspiracy minded here, in that they're just trying to discourage people from discovering like what she has to say. And, I'm not like the hugest fan of her, but I appreciate her as a writer, and I'm probably not a libertarian either. So like, I don't get why this, idea that, all these people will be sissy hypnoed into like objectivism or something. Like, it's just entertaining.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, no, I mean, I was like, I came at her from like, I mean, I was very liberal. I mean, I still like, I mean, I don't know politically what I am now, but like definitely back then when I read her, I was pretty liberal, and I could really relate with what she was talking about. And the fact that people are like, oh, don't go any further. Like, don't, don't read too much of this woman. And that's what always made me curious of her. And so when I read Anthem, like, so I'd already read Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, and when I read Anthem, it's a completely different type of novel, and like it's definitely some sort of satire, but it definitely like has like her politics front and center. Whereas Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged delve more into like of a story that I think anyone could relate to. Anthem was like, it was very specific to people who were wanting to read about an allegory.
Yeah, but also at the same time, I feel like, I mean, it's very, it's not kind of preachy and doesn't have those long diatribes that you get in her other work, which is, it's interesting because it's like refracted out into this dark age where basically, to give this a short summary of the plot, it's a sort of dark age future where a lot of the advancements of modernity have been forgotten, and everyone is basically the society is collectivist. Everyone has, individuals have plural pronouns to refer to each other, like we and they and stuff like that. There's no such thing as I's. People are given names such as, well, the main character is called Equality 7-2521. So it's clearly like like you said, allegorical idea about like, nothing that comes from an individual is approved. It's all like, it needs to be, everything's a council. That's one thing that I found really funny when I started reading this, like how everything that everyone does is basically goes through a council. And I'm like, so true.
Yeah.
No one could just do their own thing now. But so, and this is clearly, it's an allegory. It would have been written, she'd left the Soviet Union by this point, I think. But clearly her growing up in the Soviet Union has really colored her entire worldview and continued to. But this idea that, the individual must be, or individualism must be kind of quashed, is front and center here. But it's done in a way that, the main character, Equality, I'm not reading out all the numbers again. Let's just call him Equality. He rediscovers the idea of the individual and the power of the individual, and by finding out about the past, basically how there was this past where people built things like, and it's very like a great men of history, like the idea that like one man rediscovers electricity and things like that. But so this rediscovering and this curiosity coming from a place within, like, from within an individual, is something that she really kind of, front loads. But because it's about him rediscovering these ideas that are lost because it's a dark age now, it's a little less, a lot of people call her preachy, and I think it's a little less preachy than some of her other work, until it gets to the end when he has this kind of whole sermon. But it still kind of works. Like, it's still extremely kind of readable, and I still do not understand how people have this idea that she's a bad writer, because she's not. Like, at no point was I like, oh, that's a stinker or that's a clunker or whatever. It's really kind of well written and very easy to read. So everyone who says that is just wrong and hasn't actually read her.
Yeah, and I think that especially with Anthem, like, she writes how I think someone who is like programmed and put into this like sort of cult mentality, that's how they would write. It's very robotic. And so when it gets to the preachy part towards the end, that the last, I think maybe 2 or 3 sections of it was very much like, just like one of the speeches that people would give in the courtroom in Atlas Shrugged, or like a Rourke speech in the Fountainhead, like it's something like that. And like, I see that influence, but I get how like no, I don't know. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's right. So yeah, she initially conceived this as a play while she was living in Soviet Russia, and I'm like, I wonder how that would have gone down. But yeah, so and then she basically she basically read a short story and basically set it in the future, and then she submitted Anthem to a lot of mainstream magazines in the US. And so, but yeah, and her original working title actually was Ego, which is, I believe, the last word in the story, which that would be a little bit, again, this is like the whole on the nose thing. But then I also would say that it's a dystopia. It's a speculative fiction dystopia, and they're always on the nose. They're always like, you know, ramming some kind of point home, right? But there's this sort of these glasses that people put on when they like look at her, and it's always like, oh, it's really, you know, obvious and hammy and stuff like that. But it's the genre she's working in. So, you know, I would say that what she's doing is not, I wouldn't say that it's like in Anthem anyway, not innovative or anything like that. But the idea that she's a bad writer is just like completely false. And yeah, so.
I think, no, the idea that she's a bad writer is ridiculous. Like, yeah, I mean, in Anthem, she speaks, or she writes the way that I think her characters would write. Mm-hmm. And like, in Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, I think she was trying to make something that both the public could enjoy, and that's something that she would be proud of herself. So I think she wanted to write a novel that was like a little bit more like, I don't know, it had, you know, more plot. It was a little bit more like basic. Way more plot. Like it was almost like a soap opera in a way. Like, yeah, both those novels were like almost like soap operas, but I think she wanted to have something that was like much more plot driven, but still like conveyed her philosophy. Whereas Anthem was just, I mean, it was something very quick that,
and it's sort of,
it was just like, it was kind of a quick story that she was able to like convey like one basic belief.
Yeah,
and
but it also
was, freedom.
Yeah, and it also delivers it through like a very skillful use of language, I think. So again, this is another point against the whole idea that she's a bad writer. You know, you could make the case, and people have made the case that, you know, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged are kind of just laborious kind of tomes that just keep going on and on and on. This is very kind of sparse. It's very kind of spare, sorry, and it's very kind of pared down, and it's like distilled down into like one kind of central idea. But the way that's delivered is very skillfully through the language. Like there's the pronoun stuff, which is interesting, and you never feel lost when people are saying they and we to refer to individuals, but it does give you a sense of estrangement from your own world as well. Like, you know, no one ever says I or anything like that. And it is technically, because it's a diary, it is written from the first person, but I is never used until the end.
But it's illegal to say I or something like that, right? And yes. So it's like, you can't even refer to yourself, which is like the big dilemma in the whole thing, is like, you can't, like, no one can actually think for themselves. That has to be like a group think.
Yeah. And this is something that is played out in other dystopias around the same time in the first half of the 20th century. Like Orwell, very famously, a lot of 1984 is like very focused on the delivering how the language works. Like people speak in a particular way, like double speak and things like that. So, and then there's even in Huxley, like in Brave New World and stuff like that, the way that people talk about the world is shaped by how the world has been shaped into this kind of dystopic. And she does the same thing. And again, like I say, like that, this is very kind of skillfully done in the same way that it's done in those other books. So like, and you're never lost. Like, so it's one of those things where the pronoun stuff, I think in a lesser writer, you could get lost because like, wait, what are they referring to here? Who is this person? And so and she delivers that through a first person narrative that never actually, not until the very end, I believe, never actually uses I, which is a pretty fucking incredible literary feat, really. Like when you think about it, like it's first person and she doesn't use I.
Yeah, no, I mean, she doesn't give enough credit for being a talented writer. And I mean, I think Anthem, like, I always find it amazing. Like, so I always compare her work sometimes to a little bit to Thomas Pynchon in a way, whereas like, I think Anthem, if I were to start someone on Ayn Rand, I would probably start them on Anthem because it's pretty easy to read. It gives you a little bit of her philosophy. And like, it's quick. You know, you won't be daunted by the size of it like you would The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged. When you're dealing with Pynchon, I mean, you have works like V or Gravity's Rainbow or Mason Dixon, like huge works. And, you know, but you could just read The Crying of Lot 49, and that's that short work, 150 pages, something like that. And it's very much like Thomas Pynchon, and it's something that like could get you into him. So I always felt like if someone were to get into Ayn Rand, I would give them Anthem.
Yeah, and it's like the Pynchon, that's a really interesting, and I wouldn't actually have thought of that, but now that you say it, is like a really interesting comparison because The Crying of Lot 49 is literally everything. Like in that really small book is everything
Pynchon.
That's Pynchon, yeah. And it's the same with her here. Like in Anthem, it's the same thing. Like, you know, I really think there's sort of two types of writers, and there's one kind of writer who is like is always, and I think this is probably related to star signs too. I think people who are more Gemini minded, like, all of their books will be about all different things, right? Like, you know, they'll be interested in one thing and that novel will be about that thing. And then it'll be like, I'm done with that concern. I've like said my piece on that. And then they'll move on to another thing. There's another type of writer, and I'm not like making a kind of judgment on which is better. There's another type of writer who literally writes the exact same thing all the time, but it's also really good. Like, so I would say like she's probably in that camp. So is Pynchon. People like Don DeLillo, people like Welbeck. Welbeck literally writes the same novel all the time. Like it's always some kind of some kind of stand-in, perverted stand-in for him, like doing lots of, who hates like the hippies and the 68ers and stuff. And
it's always the same characters. Yeah.
And it's even my favorite book of his is one that a lot of people don't like, which is The Possibility of an Island. And that's like his.
I haven't read that one.
Oh, it's really good. It's like actually very similar to The Island, which we'll talk about in a bit, I guess. But because it's about it's a science fiction kind of novel. I think it's his only science fiction novel technically, but it's about like clones. And the Raelians, you know about the Raelians?
No.
they're like this cult of like UFO worshippers who have like developed this entire religion around UFOs and stuff. So
Is this like a real thing, or is this something
yeah.
he makes up?
Yeah, no, it's a
No,
real
it's a
thing.
real thing?
I think they're probably called
Okay.
something else in the novel, but it's clearly just like based on the aliens. But
Oh,
and then
okay.
they've got this like whole cloning program and stuff. And even with all that kind of science fictional accoutrement, it's still a Houellebecq novel. Like it's still like
Yeah.
hippies are fucking atrocious. There's that kind of nihilism, that grotesque sexuality. It's all there, and it's all the same kind of concerns, but like just in slightly different modalities, I guess. And yeah, I think she might be pretty much the same.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, she, yeah, may have like some of those same sensibilities. I get that. Um, yeah, I don't know.
So
I don't know if I have
you
any
came to
thoughts
this
on-
you came to this one to Anthem last, is what you said before.
Yeah, yeah.
How was
That
that
was
though? Like after coming off like, you know, big tomes like The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, what was this like? So you said that obviously it's shorter, no, but like, do you find it's less complex, or like maybe she's distilled it down a little bit more before she, you know, repeated and reiterated and kind of expanded on it? Like, is there something to it being a little bit more simple? Is it more simple, I guess, in terms of the philosophy and ideas?
I mean, yeah, I mean, she definitely distilled it down, but I mean, I think part of the whole point in it, Ayn Rand, is to like enjoy her story. So I think with stuff like Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, like it was about the story.
Mm.
Like, and this, I think she really wanted to distill it down to bare terms. I mean, that's what the whole, like, you know, there were very like generic names given to people. There was description. So you know, why should she write a lot about something that was just so plain? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all of the people in the stories were just bland, like names, descriptions, everything. Like, there was no like real detailed descriptions of the surroundings, which gave it like a very post-apocalyptic feeling.
Mm.
But
Except there's one passage in it which is actually, I think, probably the best, most beautiful passage in the book, which is when he is out in the wilderness. Like he escapes this kind of dystopic city where he the main character goes into like this dangerous forest, which is sort of forbidden to people because like there's lots of animals there that will kill people. And so there's these been stories basically been told to people that, you know, to go out into the wild, into nature, is forbidden because it's dangerous if you go out there by yourself, right? And there's a passage in there, I wish I could see if I could find it, but where he realizes when he's just sort of lying down on some moss in the forest that he's free and he could just do anything. And that is something that like works really well for the character's development, from getting out of this idea that everything must be mediated through councils and other people and stuff like that, literally every aspect of your life, to wow, I can just lay here, or I can get up and go hunting, I can go foraging, I can just enjoy the world, nature, right? And that passage is just so wonderfully written and gets at like something really primordial that you do actually feel when you go out into nature. I think I'm a big like nature boy. I like going out into nature for this very reason, like that there is a sense of freedom about it. And some people find that, some people don't like nature and find it scary. And I think the same thing that I think appeals to some people about the complete sort of ability to just lose yourself in nature is scary to some people, but like very, very euphoric to other people. But I think it's two sides of the same coin, I guess. But yeah, there's that passage which is really beautifully rendered about that, because it's like this awakening to him about freedom, and he could only get that while he was by himself in nature.
Yeah. No, and I mean that really brings home the whole like concept of like, you know, you can't really find yourself and find out who you really are. You can't find out who the I is until you get back to nature and you don't have any sort of like structural like government telling you what to do, or controlling your life, or controlling the circumstances that are around you. It's like, you know, he wants to experience like true freedom, and that's what's really beautiful about the novella.
And then so it's not just about like descending into nature and like becoming a primitivist or something like that. It's also about like crafting nature to your will, right?
Yeah.
So which is like, but yeah, that passage, you know, when you're just out in a river, on a lake or something like that, and just sort of like, wow, I'm at this moment, I am just completely free. Like there's nothing. Mm-hmm. And I felt that a lot actually when I, you know, went out post COVID stuff, because, you know, you just didn't feel the energy because no one was around. So you didn't feel the energy of like, you know, people queuing up and like, you know, making sure they're not too close to you and things like that. And so you didn't feel this like oppressive, you know, impingement on your kind of freedom, whereas you don't feel that in nature. But like you can't sort of just exist in that state forever. You've got to kind of do something with your freedom as well, which I think is the point of that passage, which is what he does, I guess.
Yeah.
Although it is interesting that he finds a house and like he doesn't build a house, like he finds a house. But I guess that's from the transition point from coming from a place of passivity to a place of activity, is that he finds this place, he lives in it with his girlfriend who is, I forget her name, Liberty something. And then he renames her the Golden One, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah. Yeah, like after that, the Golden One that he
likes blondes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but the ending was very good. Like it's, you know, it suggested that sort of like with it, when people concentrate on themselves, they will make a like they will actually like progress society as a whole. Mm-hmm. Rather than like concentrating on society as a whole, and then you don't, you know, go anywhere. I mean, and that's kind of what makes her, like, from the people I talk to who disagree with me about Ayn Rand, like that's sort of what like makes her not good, is because she doesn't think of other people. She just thinks of herself, and her characters think of themselves. And this is kind of the perfect example of that. And I mean, I also think it's a perfect philosophical argument against what, you know, these other people are arguing about. So
what other people, what are they arguing about? What do you mean?
I think it's they don't like Ayn Rand's like individualist stance. Like they would rather have like some sort of a collectivist movement. They want to think about others rather than themselves. And really, like all you can do in your life is think about yourself and what's best for you. And I mean, I honestly don't like see any other way. Like, I understand looking out for other people, but I think if, as far as like, free markets and capitalism is concerned, like, I think, people have to make their own choices about stuff.
Yeah, I do think that like that's part of what people's problem with her is that she's the, I guess, philosophical poster girl for capitalism in a way. But I think like from what I'm not as well read in her as you probably are, but from what I can tell, I think that she would sort of critique capitalism as it exists today as well, because it's not free enough. So
yeah,
it's not like she's endorsing the current status quo, I think from what I can tell. Anyway, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, no. I mean, yeah, no, she lived well before what is going on now. So
no, but even at her time as well, I think I think the whole libertarian objectivist thing is like, they don't like central banks. They don't like monopolies and things like that, right? So, she'd be right there with you, blue hair, against monopoly. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But the what was I going to say about her? Finally, she I lost my train of thought now. Oh yeah, this idea that her politics being infused in the writing. So like this is perhaps what's challenging about her, is that she communicates her message very effectively through the lens of fiction, I guess, and I guess that's what makes her so threatening. But it's also, I think, the more recent idea of her as being like this bad, evil force actually comes from more recent history with like the neocons, because lots of the neocons in the US, like, all her books were like their Bible. And so everyone was like, George Bush, Dick Cheney bad, and all those people. And therefore, she was bad, and so like, and all the sort of stuff that I think happened in that era, she wouldn't have approved of, like government surveillance of people and all that kind of crap. So, it's a weird, there's a lot of contradictions with the way that people, both on the left and the right, talk about her.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if she would have approved of the wars or anything like that either. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't see how you get that from what I can have read of her philosophy either. Like, I don't see how that leads to, the war on terror, or getting involved in stupid wars that the US has nothing to gain.
I think it could be part of like, the right wing trying to appeal to academia. Just.
Yeah. So yeah, it is. I think she really triggers people.
No, yeah, definitely.
And I don't know, I find that
great authors out there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I find that's a good energy to have. Like, I like that she kind of triggers people, but I just think like when you say, oh, she's bad, well, what do you mean by that? Like, she's a bad influence. And like, that suggests that she's actually good, that she has some kind of talent, because if she's a bad influence on people who like will go down this rabbit hole of like being ultra libertarians, that suggests that there's something appealing about the way that she writes her sentences, structures her paragraphs, builds these stories. So that suggests a kind of skill. So that's what I mean about this contradiction, like, oh, she's bad, but also she's a bad writer.
Yeah. No, that's the one that really gets me because objectively, she is not a bad writer.
Yeah.
Like any English major out there, come on, just like they'll tell you.
And that's the built-in reaction. Like
Right.
it's the built-in reaction is just like, especially from literary types, it's like, she's a terrible writer. It's like, well, actually she's not. Like, just look at it objectively. But yeah, so I find that a very kind of interesting. I like that she triggers people, like, and firebrand feminist icon Ayn Rand triggers people.
Oh yeah, no, she triggers people, and I'm grateful for it. Yeah.
Right.
Like, thank God.
Should we move on to talking about The Aynland?
Oh yeah.
All right.
The Michael Bay classic.
The Michael Bay classic. So you suggested this, and I'm very interested as to why you suggested this. I can see some connections here, but I want to get your kind of reasoning.
Well, because there were a lot of movies that were sort of like this, but they were like, okay, so like The Giver is like this, but it's also based on a book. There were a few other, like maybe like The Beach or something. It was, I don't know. There were a bunch of other movies that I was thinking about, but this one didn't have any sort of like, there wasn't any sort of novel basis to it, but it still had that that basic plot of like, the government controls like your life. But I mean, there's a surprise ending to it, right? There's a twist, but it still has that basic, like, the government decides there's a system in place of what you're going to do every single day, what your job is, when you go to bed, when you wake up. And so I felt that was interesting. And also just because this was like one of those movies that it should have done so well.
It was a failure.
Yeah, it was so bad. Yeah, it bombed. And I was reading an interview with one of the producers, and she was like, well, like Scarlett Johansson just wasn't, a big enough star. And Ewan McGregor wasn't just a big enough star. And, that was it. Like, yeah, that's why it bombed. But it was entertaining because Michael Bay, I know he's, he is what he is. He's a mainstream Hollywood director, and
he knows what he is too. That's what's actually really appealing about him.
Yes. Yeah. He knows exactly what he's doing. And like this movie is entertaining all the way through. It's extremely entertaining. And that's like, that's what you'll get with Michael Bay. So, yeah.
I found I like that connection you made with like the kind of regimented, like everything you do. But what's the interesting part about this is, and it's a connection to Anthem, is that it's not just the government, it's like a corporate government partnership. Because like this entire facility that Ewan McGregor's character, more names with dashes in them too. So there you go. There's another one. There's another connection. But I forget what his name is, like dash something Echo or whatever.
Echo something.
Yeah,
Echo,
Lincoln Echo 6.
Lincoln Echo 6. Yeah.
So, but yeah, this whole facility that basically Ewan McGregor, Scarlett Johansson, and the people in this like very regimented kind of society, they are told that they are in this facility and there's a lottery to go to the island. But what it actually is that these people are all clones and they're being harvested by people outside this kind of holographic kind of simulation of like a post-apocalyptic world, basically. And whenever people get chosen for the lottery, they're basically being chosen to die and to get harvested for their organs for their very rich patrons outside. So the people who they're cloned from. So they're all clones. But yeah, this entire facility is built from a partnership between the US Department of Defense and like sleazy kind of biotech corporation. And so it's sort of like collusion between government and corporation, which is like, I feel like a more realistic take on something like this that would happen rather than all being the government or all being corporation, you know? So I think that's interesting. And also as a Michael Bay film too, it's actually a very curious Michael Bay film because it begins with a lot more setup and a lot more slowly than a lot of his other work, you know? Usually he starts out very high octane and just continues to build up like but this one, like for the first act, pretty much like not much happens. Like, and I actually loved it. I love that he like was just taking his time and just like exploring this like high tech world where all these clones, which you don't find out they're clones until like much later. They all live in this futuristic kind of utopia, dystopia. And so I found that very interesting as a Michael Bay film, like how he was, you know, just taking his time, like being almost a little bit contemplative in a way that I'm not used to seeing from him.
Yeah, no, I really liked especially the Steve Buscemi character.
Yes.
In the film. Like he's the guy that like knows exactly what's going on, and you know he's gonna try to like, you know, he's gonna befriend like both Scarlett Johansson and Ewan McGregor and try to ease them into the fact that they're clones. Yeah, no, I really like that. But yeah, no, it definitely was two different films. Like the first half was like, yeah, just explaining the reality of what was going on. And the second half was just kind of like Jimon Hinsu, I guess that's his name, you know, like going after him and, you know, trying to seek both of them in this desert. And there were two very like different films going on in that one film.
And then when they're out of the facility as well, then this kind of like quirky fish out of water story as well. Yeah. Like
yeah.
While being pursued by the most beautiful black man on earth. Like
yeah. What happened to him?
Yeah,
like
what did happen to him?
Is he in anything anymore?
I don't know. I think the last thing that I saw of him, he was in that Blood Diamond film, wasn't he?
Yeah, but I mean,
that was a while ago.
Was that after The Island, or was that?
I think it was after. Yeah.
Before, because I know he did Amistad. He did this.
Your bus free.
He did Blood Diamond. I think that's it. I don't know. I think those were the three.
Yeah, maybe he does a lot of French films or something now. I don't know. But yeah, so basically they go on the run. Sean Bean is the like director of this facility, and he hires Jimon Honsu to track them down. And then basically Ewan McGregor goes to find his clone and confront him. But they do it really like how it kind of ends, and his clone basically the guy he's cloned from sort of tries to trap him and get him caught and returned back to this facility. But then they do this whole Spider-Man double take, no you sort of thing. And then Jimon Honsu he does a little trick and then kills the original rather than the clone. And so the clone is sort of has this opportunity to take over the original's life. But then doesn't do that. Well, he does eventually, but it then goes back to the facility to free all the clones. That's basically what happens at the end. But throughout all of that, yeah, like you say, it's two different movies. Like the first is almost like a throwback to those old 70s dystopian movies, like Logan's Run, in a way that you get a real kind of
definitely
reference to that, because like it's sort of very slow burn at the start. But then when they get out and they're just like, there's these sweeping vistas of like, where is it? It looks like it's in Nevada or Arizona or something, I think.
It could be somewhere around. Yeah. I mean, I'm in Nevada. So it's like, it's somewhere south, the West.
Because they use that, what's that town called? They filmed in this town, which is like, was an old gold rush town. And like, it was like completely abandoned after 5 years once they exhausted the vein. And so it's just like, they filmed a few films there over the years, but it's just like these old crumbling buildings that look really amazing, against the landscape, that they filmed a bit there, when they got out. And then they sort of get out and sort of find the Steve Buscemi character, which is like, that was so convenient that they were just like, let's just follow this highway and find the exact bar that he's in. I love that. That's the kind of stuff that used to be in Hollywood movies that's not anymore. Like, I feel like a lot of writers and directors and stuff feel like they have to explain things like that. I'm like, no, just, it's a movie. Just make them find him,
Yeah. No, it's like, it's just a fun film. But I mean, as far as it relates to Ayn Rand, I mean, I feel the whole sort of government corporate control thing, and then breaking out of that is sort of what that's the part of the film that reminded me of Anthem. And I guess there are other movies like that, but I guess like it was just kind of an odd one that I think was overlooked, and it's good. Like, it's really entertaining. I would, I'd recommend it to anyone. But
it is about the power of individuality too, because it's like, this guy is a clone, so he's genetically exactly the same. Even his fingerprints are the same as this Ewan McGregor guy on the outside. But like, he becomes an individual not by becoming that person, but by asserting his will in the world. Basically, that's how, which is basically how you do become an individual, is that you make a mark on the world, however big or small or whatever. But that comes from your inner strength and your will to do it, right? So I can get that connection too, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, individuality, though, like, it conflicts with equity sometimes, and that's like what I guess the opposing philosophy is. So it's sort of like, I don't know, with Anthem anyway, it's sort of like, can freedom exist without equity, is kind of like the main thing that like I take away from.
Yeah, well, all the clones are individuals too. That's the something that the movie is at pains to make clear, because Scarlett Johansson and Ewan McGregor, the characters there, they're kind of imprinted with memories and stuff like that, because they're sort of grown fully formed. So they're only like 3 and 4 technically years old, but and they so have memories of their original, but like they also have like individual personalities that they have inculcated within, by interacting with each other in this facility. And they have to be individuals in order for their like organ harvesting to be viable. That's sort of explained in the film as well, because like they had this idea that they would just make these kind of sacks. They're called agnates, I think, kind of sacks of like clone material that they just harvest the organs out of. And that's how they present it to the public. But it's actually like fully formed humans, because it doesn't work unless they're like living, breathing, conscious human beings. So it does make this kind of case that like all of those clones are human beings, and it's not and individuals in their own right. But it makes a very interesting point, which is probably a bit too materialist for me, where it says that an individual is made by what they do in the world, which to some extent is true, but I'm also very much I'm a soul guy. So like, they're all individuals that also have a soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm a soul guy too. Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, I guess that's one of the things that has always sort of lost me about Ayn Rand is she never really talks about this. She talks about the I, which I guess is the soul. But I don't know. It's sort of like, is the I how the soul acts in the world, and the soul is something different? I don't know. That sort of always gets me with her.
Yeah, it's very
because I know
atheistic.
she's an atheist. You know, she's atheist, and I believe in a God, but I don't. Yeah, so that's why I always like bash heads with her a little bit in that.
Yeah, because I think with her the idea is that it's like an atheistic, legalistic point of view in a way, because it's like this is even in Anthem when she says that he discovers these old texts, and he discovers that people thought that they had this inborn right, and it's very important that she says right. And I think she's probably elaborates on this in her other books as well, that like I don't know for sure though, because I haven't read them all, but this idea of rights are not given, they are just possessed by individuals by virtue of being born. But like that, this is sort of like a you get into really philosophical territory here, but like but if they're not given, where does it come from? Like but it's just like a circular thing, like just being a person born means you have rights. But like even like the US founding fathers, like God gave you the rights. Like that's it's in the document, you know, like, and most of them were kind of deists or atheists anyway, but like this idea that there's this higher power that grants you this kind of right to autonomy or whatever, because you're a human. But like, it's not just by virtue of being born, because then why do we not give the same rights to pigs and stuff? So I don't think the atheist argument is from that very metaphysical point about like, you know, by virtue of being born, we have rights as humans. But then it's like, why? You got nothing.
Yeah.
You know, you need some kind of transcendental reason for that. I think that's a blind spot maybe with her. I don't know. Who am I to say, but who are we to say?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not gonna like get that deep on the subject, but it's just, it's always very interesting to talk about though. It's,
Yeah. So, anything else to say about the island? Oh, well, I did have something actually. So I unironically think Michael Bay is great. Like for what he does, he understands what he does, and makes that for lots of people who also understand what he does. one thing that has bugged me about his sort of latter day films, I'm thinking about like the sort of later Transformers films and stuff like that, is that there's so much fucking shit going on the screen that you're like, what the fuck is going on? You feel lost, It's just this like, kind of cornucopia of like, messy CGI and stuff like that. And there's a bit of that in here, but it's very contained and very like everything makes sense. So you have these like action sequences that are really like elaborate, but they're also very sensible in terms of like, oh, I can comprehend what's going on. It's not like shaky cam all the time. So I'm like, what the fuck is happening? It's very, one thing leads to another, propulsive, kind of reactive to, every scene in a sequence reacts to the next. So that it's really well made in that sense. The action's very good, like, which in most early Michael Bay films, I think that's the case. But in the later ones, it gets a bit iffy. I think it's just like a whole heap of crap is thrown up on screen.
Yeah.
Anything else to add about The Island?
No, I don't. I do think it's a good Michael Bay film. Not as good as Pain and Gain, but it's like, as you said, like the action sequences, it keeps you interested. And as far as Anthem goes, I mean, anyone who's interested in Ayn Rand, read Anthem. It's short, it's easy, it's entertaining, and I think she also like lays out her philosophy pretty clearly. Like it's not like she's not pulling any punches with the novella.
Yeah, it's a simple read as well. Like, if you're going to find The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged a little bit too daunting, maybe just start with that. And if you want to find out more about it, you can knock it over in like an hour, a couple of hours. So, it's not a big commitment. And you will also see as well that it's very tautly written. So, you'll put to bed this idea in your head that she's not a great writer, because she's fine, but in my book. So like, I'm very much in this mode now of just being like, I'm not going to let people's reputations precede them. I just want to get my own view of it, so it's just the best way to do things, I think, and possibly a very individualist way of doing things.
Yeah.
Which is the best way, I think, in terms of approaching art and making it too. You should be an individual when you make art. You should like almost not care about literally not care about what other people think when you're making us.
Yeah, that's it. That's what Ayn Rand would want. She wouldn't want you to give a shit about what other people think and do what you want to do, because that's going to be the best product. And
ultimately that serves people, because other people too, like who vibe with it. You don't like making your stamp on the world and making it your individual, unique kind of sort of mark is like will be helpful to people who vibe with it. So like even if you're not an ultra like individualist, like I think you should be about your art. Like 100%. Anyway, do you have anything to shill, Erik, or
nah, nothing to shill. Nothing. No products. Just
this is the hyper capitalist episode for us. Speaking of which, as well, just one final note about The Island. The product placement was like hilarious. Like every scene.
The Aquafina water.
The Puma shoes, like right the first scene. That's why I think it's like weird that it was a failure too, because it's like, didn't you get some money to sort of subsidize the budget from all this product placement? But probably not enough.
I know you think you would have negotiated a deal about that, but
All right. Thank you so much, Erik, aka Organized Meat, for joining us today. Lovely to speak to you. And yeah, if I ever do any more Rand, I'll have to have you on again.
Oh yeah, please do. It was a pleasure, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
He takes all the credit. He set it all, but he's never meant it. For him was a good things to eat, and people just organize meat. The game is what there is. He's screaming at street signs and airplanes. His time has come to go away. His time has come to go away. He loved her as much as he could, 5 times, 10 times as he could. But he should have stuck with a pet, something he could bury himself. He shakes and he falls. He scurries from rat hole to rat hole. His time has come to go away. His time has come to go away. When it comes to the birds and the bees, all he got was pecked and stung. But the neighbors, they don't want to hear it. They say what's done is done. They want him bound and gagged. They watch him dragged off in handcuffs. His time has come to go